Hello and welcome back to PEX Live Low Code Automation 2022. If you have just joined us, this webinar is delivered to you live, so you can interact with our speakers through live poll questions and the Q&A box at the bottom of your screen. Each session will have fresh new content in the resource box provided by our speakers and sponsors, so don't forget to download these digital giveaways. Now, let me introduce our speakers for this session. We have Shay O'Connor, who is Head of Solutions at FlowForma, and we have Paul Stone, who is the Product Strategist at FlowForma, and both of them will talk about how to unleash innovation with no-code process automation. Now, Paul, Shay, it's over to you.
Thank you, Anna, and welcome everybody to today's session. Wanted to start asking Paul a very core question in the whole digital transformation evolution, and that is the difference between no code and low code. Now, some of you might think there isn't a difference or it's always grouped together, and that's because a lot of analysts, etc., a lot of talk about this area, they lump low code and low code together because it's not full-on coding. So, Paul, can you tell us what the difference is?
Certainly, Shay, thanks. So FlowForma is a system that supports the implementation and execution of digital processes, but it's very much aimed at business people. And systems like this tend to fall into two categories, no code and low code. No code processes are primarily aimed at business people, to allow business people to configure processes themselves, to take ownership of the processes, to maintain them and continuously improve them without the need for specialist resources. The big advantages of no code are it's very easy to get started because you don't need specialist IT skills. You can actually get up and running and onboard it very quickly. And you can also build those processes very quickly so that you'd be looking to a 4 to 6 week time frame to actually start receiving return on your investment. It empowers business people to take ownership of the processes and to define those processes for themselves and refine them as well. And this really encourages widespread automation, where the business people are the owners, they feel responsibility, they're able to encourage their community to actually adopt those processes. And it drives support for business agility because you can change those processes and modify them very easily. The key thing as well is that this system gives you measurable results. You can actually see the impact of those processes and see how much difference they're making, and align the processes with your company objectives, with your business goals. The key thing at the end there is that you're not going to require IT or external IT providers, for example, to build your solutions. You can build them yourself. If you can compare this to the local...
Sorry, just on that, Paul, just on that.
Sure.
So you're kind of saying like the biggest difference between the sort of no code and low code scenarios is that you can build your environments without the need for, well, just by using logic. So, and without the need to do any syntax, any coding, it literally is a case of I want to do this, this, and this. Here are the rules that govern it. And a business person is best placed to do that because they don't have to interpret anything, they can just do it themselves. Now, I know I've synopsized that pretty simplistically,
but that's absolutely right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So you don't need any specialist skills as such to be able to build out a solution. And what this means is you can draft a solution very quickly. So you don't even need to have a distinct defined process map at the start. You can draft out a solution, pass out that solution to your colleagues, let them review it, and then make amendments really quickly and build that solution so that it's adopted really quickly as well. It's very different to a low-code approach, which requires IT specialist skills. So typically with low-code, you're working with the IT department constantly or the IT service provider to actually build out a system with them. And that's all fine. But what that means is like an IT project. So you have all the project controls, etc. So really, no-code is very different to that. It's much more agile and it's much more in the ownership of the business person, which ultimately encourages innovation because they are able to actually draft out processes, try things out. And if they fail, no big deal, just do it a different way. And that's the real key thing about no code.
So, and like we just said, that that's the core differences between the two. It's not an either or scenario, but that is fundamentally the difference between the two. When you do still have to code, and the other one you don't.
That's it, exactly. And what it means is that you still will have your IT service provider and your applications and all that are still there.
Yeah.
What you have is this extra ability within the organization to actually be agile and build out solutions yourselves, and ultimately to innovate in the process.
And on that, there's the acorn approach to the evolution of the digital transformation, or the application of digital forms, digital process within an organization. The acorn approach is basically starting small. So you got proving the point. So proving how something like this can be done by business users, and evolving it from there. What people don't always, and I say face up to, well, what people don't always see is that it's a whole change of culture for an organization. They are literally going from predominantly a manual, this is the way it's always been scenario, to forms, digital responsibility, a lot of data integrity. Instead of filling out a sheet or picking up a piece of paper or picking up a telephone, they're actually filling in digital forms, and it knows where to go. So it's electronically, digitally going around the organization, going to the right people, getting the right piece of work, the right data, moving around. Sometimes it takes people from an adoption point of view, it takes them a short time to get their head into that, because you're changing a fundamental way of doing it. So the easiest way to do it is pick something, prove it, and then evolve it. And the cool thing about, like with a platform where the business users can create the processes, that you can go at your own pace. If you want to do it fast, do it fast. If you want to take it slowly, take it slowly. But it's at your pace. And again, we always see the best impact for any digital evolution within an organization is to pick an obvious process. Pick something that it'll resonate with them. You'll get feedback. And you said this earlier on, the whole agility part. When you get that feedback, you can react and then make it part of your day-to-day working. So you can integrate with existing systems, do all that nice stuff, because you proved it now.
It's a very different way to when you're working with an IT supplier, let's say, where you're moving at a much slower pace. You also have to be much more exact about every action you take. So when you're implementing a step in a process, defining fields on a screen, you have to be very precise about those, and it takes a long time to change them. This is a much more agile approach to that. So
it means you don't go down sort of take the wrong route. You can easily maneuver and say, right, that's not exactly what I meant, we go this direction. It's far easier to maneuver within the process because you've got full control again. You're not coding everything. Just from a question, I want, if the guys here on the call, it would be great, even from an education of ourselves and an education for the audience. We just have a quick question here. If you'd like to give an answer as to what prompted your organization, or what do you think is going to prompt them to automate workflows in 2020? It would be great, guys, if you could just make your selection. We'll give it about 20 seconds. So, drive culture of innovation internally, become more agile business, drive productivity across your organization, reduce bottom line costs for better data and reporting. Interesting. Is there one area that you think is important for the organization or not? Or is it more than one? A lot of people look at this whole automation of processes as fixing an issue, and then others see it as just a general evolution of the business. Okay, I just give it a few more seconds if people would just like to make their selection. 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. Okay, interesting. To drive productivity across the organization seems to be the overall winner. And drive culture of innovation internally would be second. Paul, do you think that is?
Yeah, I think that aligns very well. Yeah, absolutely. I think it aligns very well with the customer feedback that we received, that productivity is the main driver, but increasingly people are looking to innovate, to differentiate their companies against their competitors by innovating and introducing new processes and new interactions with the client base and with the suppliers and so on. So yeah, that's very it's very interesting, and it aligns very well, I think, with our customer base at the moment.
Yeah, and I think it's a very positive approach.
Yeah.
So it's the main one being better productivity, get more out of your existing people, you know.
Absolutely, and it's very interesting to see that, you know, reduced bottom line cost is one of the lower measures. Because I can certainly say, and Shay, I'm sure you'd agree, if we go back 10 years when we used to work in the old BPM space and so on, that, you know, reducing cost was the main driver, and now when we look at it today, it's very much in the background, and that's definitely something we see from that client base, that productivity is the key one, and innovation to differentiate and become more competitive is definitely close behind.
Yeah, so true. So this is really, and again, we come across this a lot. Because we have innovators in organizations. We have those that want to gain productivity, have productivity gains, and sometimes they hit a few brick walls. So how do you overcome the problems at, say, boardroom or decision-making levels? The reality is that there's a whole area of challenges that crop in. You've got, well, there's a lack of understanding, but you've also got then lack of skills. It seems like a big mountain to climb sometimes. And what's put in front of you is, here are the blockers. Like, you know, people won't take to this. They won't go with this. It's a new way of doing work. I don't see how people do it. And they might say, "Oh, we won't be able to do everything in such a short space of time." You know, you've got, so you, as it says there, you know, and I don't want to repeat it there, it's all unrealistic goals, poor adoption, that sort of thing. But the reality is, the fact that you become self-sufficient means that you can actually evolve your change at your own pace and to as much as you want. Like, the thing about it, you should never set yourself weak goals. You know, you set yourself some pretty good goals that you can go for. Say, no, I'm going to make sure. Now, we have some organizations, one of our clients, they will say that they have a paperless finance department, and they set their goal as that. And honestly, if ever you saw a finance department for paper, like, it's always beset with it. But they literally will tell you, 100%, we've got paperless finance department. They just looked at every single process and said, no, we're not using paper. Boom, we're going digital. And they did it. They set that goal. So when you start maneuvering around the fact that, and trying to evangelize internally that, hey, we're going to be the masters of our own destiny. We're going to create our own processes, because we don't have to have this high level of skills. We just have to know how to process. So you do it yourself. And if you have one process at a time mentality, it's the how do you eat an elephant scenario, you know, one bite at a time. But you can go with whatever. If you get 1, 2, 3, 4 people who's tying in with and who bought into what you're doing, you're going to get one process at a time from each of them. So you're getting 10 processes at a time. You can then increase that if you wish.
I think that's something quite, yeah. I think it's something quite unique to our product that we have built-in scalability. So in other words, you don't just concentrate on digitizing only one process and then you leave it and that's it. You basically digitize one process and measure the results from that and then use those results to justify doing the next one and the next one and the next one. And with that whole no-code mentality, it's actually very easy. Like we have clients who kicked off on one process and they actually finished it in record time, where we're talking a few days, and decided, okay, let's keep going, and they digitized another one and another one. Including that example that you'll be familiar with, Shay, where somebody set off to digitize 2 processes and ended up digitizing 42. So they actually did 20 times as many as they set out to do. I think that was an 8-week or 10-week time frame. 10
weeks, and that was 2 people in 10 weeks.
Yeah. That was an incredible achievement.
Oh, they just got on a roll and just decided that the impact is going to have is so big. Well, let's just keep going. The reality is, every process that you digitize is going to have you working more efficiently. So the more of them that you do, the greater the impact. But also, it makes working a lot easier. You don't have to get bogged down with admin. You don't have to get bogged down with who does this go to, or how do I escalate this, or the process knows what to do. So it takes, it's not going to be, press a button and everything happens. You still have to do your work, but the reality is it's there in front of you.
Yeah, I think a key thing as well there, Shay, I know we're tight for time, but I'd also call out that adoption piece where, it's great to innovate and create new processes and new ways of working. But at the end of the day, it's no good unless they're adopted by the workplace and you're generating a return. At the end of the day, that's ultimately it. Doesn't matter how quickly you can build things, as long as they're not adopted, that doesn't work. So it really helps to have a system that you can easily modify and be agile with, so that you can actually change it to make sure that people learn to love it and start adopting it and using it and evangelizing within their organization.
Yeah, and that adoption is key to everything, because you don't want to have any roadblocks, you don't want to have any barriers against this. The reality is, and everybody knows this, is that in 5 years' time, your processes are going to be digitized. There's going to be less and less and less and less and less paper. There's going to be less reliance on your inbox. It's going to be all digitized. So why not do it now? Get ahead of the curve. I mean, in 5 years' time, you're going to have 5 years worth of data. You're going to have hundreds of processes digitized. It's just going to be the norm. And it's here now. You can do it yourselves. It's not a big deal. Just really quickly on ourselves, really fast, because we've got some great use cases, real world use cases that we want to tell you about. But bottom line is, all of these clients start at the same spot. They all wanted to become more efficient. They all wanted, and in general, they all had a challenge that they wanted to address. And once they started, it accelerated. We go back to clients after a few months, and the numbers of processes are always increasing. Nobody that we know of, and we're open for you to let us know, nobody that we know of who has started to digitize processes has reversed that decision. Everybody, when they start, they just escalate it, they keep it going. The thing about FlowForma, and this is crucial to adoption, when the forms are created, they're created automatically. You can have your own look and feel on them, but they're created automatically from your logic. The cool thing about that is that when people learn the first process, the next one, and the next one, and the next one, they know what to do already. It does not have to be explained to them. And that is key for adoption. It's always the first process is the one that takes the most time. You get the most feedback. And when you learn from that, all of the rest of them just fall into place from a learning point of view. And as you can see there, it's a unique scenario with our step bar. You can actually see where you are in a process and what work has to be done to get this to completion. But another question I have, guys, the questions don't seem to be there. Oh, okay. So what are your requirements for a digital process automation tool? So if you have one, or if you're planning to have a digital process automation tool, what would you consider to be the core requirement for this? Do you wish to integrate with existing systems? Is it for ease of implementation, so that you want it to be less of a learning curve, or not as steep a learning curve that you can bring it into the organization easily? Is it for usability for business users? So in other words, do you want your business users to be able to tackle this? Or standardizing process across your enterprise. So we get a lot of organizations who have different locations and operate quite independently of each other. So when you digitize processes, it gives you an opportunity to standardize your processes across the enterprise. So is it that? Again, I'll ask you just to make one selection. I think this is a radio button scenario, so one selection is all you'll get the chance to do. So we'll just wait for a moment, give you a chance to answer. And 10, 9, 8. Okay, we'll just check what the results are on that. Okay, so interesting. Usability of the tool for business users and integration with existing systems are the top two. It's fairly spread though, Paul. I mean, it is fairly spread. There's the big winner is usability of the tool for business users.
I think that is a critical one. Like we were talking earlier on about adoption, and it's that usability that means that people are going to actually adopt that business process. So if they have a tool in the background that's helping them along the way to execute that business process, you know, that they will really appreciate that usability. And I could just putting my FlowForma hat on. As you know, Shay, we're very much focused on making the system as easy to use for the business user as possible. And one of the things we've done in that regard is we've made the tool accessible from anywhere. So you can use it on your desktop, you can use it, you know, on mobile devices, on Teams within Microsoft Teams, for example. So we try to make it as easy to access as anywhere.
I think people expect that from any platform to go to now. I think they're actually going, hey, you know, if we're going to go at this, I want to be able to. It's got to be usable all over the place. I mean, I think that's totally understandable and expected. So some case studies. Now these are actual. I mean, I think we do have some of these. I think the case studies are actually online as well. But so we have clients who have gone through this process and have yielded incredible results. Paul, you know about this one here.
Yeah, absolutely. I'll take this one. So Nipro,
just a couple of minutes, just a couple of minutes on each one, to be honest. Yeah.
Oh, sure. Yeah, that's fine. So Nipro are a very large medical devices manufacturer and distributor based headquartered out of Belgium, but they have locations over 26 different sites. So they needed a system that was going to be accessible from anywhere in any of their sites within any of their countries, etc. And they have a large enterprise architecture, large company with a large enterprise architecture centered around SAP. There are lots of line of business applications centered around SAP. And they were very dependent on an IT services provider because a large set of applications to maintain and develop. And what was happening was that it was taking a long time to implement any change. So there was lots of delays in capturing information because they weren't able to track all the activities within the organization. And they'd have to make modifications to different systems to be able to track additional data, etc. And they couldn't have a lot of visibility of the activity. So they'd have, let's say, account managers going out to visit clients, and they wouldn't be able to record the interactions easily and centralize them in a central database to keep track of where everything was at any one point in time. And they wanted to enhance customer experience as well. So a lot going on there. What they did was they looked to IT. IT wasn't able to respond quickly enough. And then they looked out to the market and they found FlowForma, which was a very agile system and it seemed to meet the needs very well. They did extensive analysis and they selected FlowForma and started small. So they started off in all places, the marketing department, where marketing had some processes and didn't have a lot of good backup systems. So they decided to use FlowForma there to great success, where the marketing staff themselves actually built their own process-based solutions using FlowForma and implemented it, and then they started rolling it out to other areas, other departments within the business. But the key thing is that was all managed and maintained, kicked off and so on by the business people themselves without involvement from IT. So it really helped.
Is it my imagination, or do I remember, did IT push back on this initially? Did they? Yeah,
from a support point of view, there was a little bit of pushback from IT because basically they were a little bit reluctant to let business people build out their own solutions, right? And that's completely understandable. But we actually have governance applications and so on that allow IT to maintain the environment, right? Maintain the environment, but let the business people take control of the applications. That's the way to look at it.
Right.
So IT still hold the.
So the IT
keys,
were still So they were still governing. Okay. Great.
That's it. They'd hold the keys. They'd set the guardrails, if you like, but then the business people would be able to build out their own process-based applications themselves with FlowForma. And it was really successful. Very, very successful, and it helped them basically cover off the gaps in their standardized applications, like the SAP system, for example. They were able to cover off functionality that wasn't there and record all the detail of the activities of the resources, so they could record the activities.
That's a really good point. So that's a really good point, because I mean, other systems are always going to be available in companies, organizations, HR, finance, ERP, etc. But they'll never cover every scenario, every instance of everything. They just can't. It's impossible. So NeedPro, in this case, they were using FlowForma to fill a lot of the gaps.
Yeah,
and they could do it quite easily.
The gaps in the application. And the other thing is, like, it's also allowing them to respond to change in their environment. So when they got like new ways of working, they were able to implement those much faster than they were able to do before.
And of course, with pharmaceuticals, you got a lot of governance. You got a lot of medical devices, pharmaceuticals. So new compliance comes in, new changes, they can change it really quickly.
You need that full audit trail, right? And absolutely, and kind of FlowForma just builds it up in the background automatically. So as you're executing your process, you automatically get that audit trail, which of course, as you say, Shay, is very useful in regulated environments.
I'm going to just move on quickly here, Paul. Sure. Another one, again, another one that you are very familiar with, but it's a process, I think, that in this example, that a lot of organizations it'll resonate with them.
Yeah, a little bit of background. So Ergo was a rapidly expanding large services firm, IT services firm in Ireland. And they expanded organically and also through acquisition. And when they did this, it brought a lot of change into the company. And what they wanted to do was manage the change. As they were bringing in new business units, buying up companies, introducing new units, they would introduce new systems. And it all became quite spread out and difficult to control. So they were looking for a solution that would help them control what they were doing. So I'm just going to they used it in a number of different departments, a number of different areas, but I'll just illustrate one. So one of them was in contract management. In the past, they had basically they had a wide array of different types of contract with different types of clauses and variables in there, and all of this was maintained manually. So they stored it all within a document management system, but all the contracts were actually maintained manually, and many of the contracts were not kept up to date, etc. So they had various problems, and they decided to use FlowForma to help with this particular scenario. So FlowForma was able to capture all the key decision points inside the contract, and then automatically generate the contract document and pass that through various resources in the organization for approval, and ultimately allow it to be sent out to the client for sign-off. So they're able to track all of that activity, and also set up reminders automatically so that the contractor was reviewed and at certain key points and so on. So basically, the full contract was able to introduce full contract management on the contracts with their clients and their suppliers, and help them to achieve various ISO standards like ISO 9000, ISO 27000, and so on. So it really had a great benefit to them. and raised the game in terms of their position in the marketplace, because they were able to achieve those standards, for example, and also to integrate and expand. It's like integrate their acquisitions and expand at an increasing rate. And FlowForma contributed to that.
And of course, involving the third parties, and that's really crucial as well, so that you get a full alignment with your rules and regulations for your contracts.
Yes, you're getting an end-to-end process. So some of those actors are inside your organization, some of those are outside your organization, but you're tracking it all the way along the way, right? And also you can measure performance. You can see where the bottlenecks are in the processes, where things are being slow. Maybe that's a point outside your organization. Maybe it's somebody inside who's basically holding things up. But FlowForma tracks everything. You're able to see that process performance immediately.
So I think that's a very important point, Paul, because it's something that any organization who is moving from an existing process that could be half manual, but not automated, not digitally automated, to a digital process for the same process. The reality is you can now collect information about how successful each of the steps and how efficient each of the steps in the process are, and identify bottlenecks that would not have been evident through a manual system, and possibly I mean, it's funny, it was one of the things that came up before, and I know that I'm kind of diverting a small bit, but when people say, listen, we're not going to digitize until we fully document all our processes. And the reality is they're documenting processes that are probably inefficient in the first place, where if they adopt say in our case, with our platform, you can put together the framework, agree the framework, and then see what the results are and make changes as a result of information and actual data from the process.
Absolutely. And you remember the old term analysis paralysis, where basically you spend so much time documenting your process and making it 100% correct, that by the time you had it documented, it was already out of date because the business has changed, and FlowForma is very much not about that, Get your draft together really quickly. I mean, we're talking really quickly, and get it out there, and get the feedback and evolve it, And it allows you, as we had said before, that you can innovate really well with that.
And we are getting pressed for time here. Just a last example for one of our clients is a CBB. It's a joint venture on Tideway East. So these guys are, and anybody in the UK, especially in London, will have seen all the hoarding up around the city because they are tunneling underneath the Thames. And it's a pretty large endeavor, but a big thing there is that the workforce is spread, because you can imagine you've got a 25-kilometer stretch. You've got people everywhere. And again, you've got the scenario of the efficiency of getting sign-offs to do work, permissions to do different things, etc., across the whole length of the project. Doing that manually, doing that by phone, you don't have to trying to validate things, just wasn't going to work. And if you're going to do it that way, you're going to be basically seriously inefficient and not really have any visibility in what was going on. And the guys knew this, and they wanted to get a cohesive platform and a cohesive way of operating. And FlowForma came in, and honestly, it came in and it aligned with existing systems that were there. So they had other systems, but this sort of day-to-day processes, these day-to-day ones for repetitive tasks and for sign-offs and for permissions, etc. As you can see there, it's a big thing. They saved over 700 hours, and that's probably a year old now. I'd say it's more now at this stage. Paul, you probably know the evolution of that as well. But, the guys basically wanted a scenario where non-technical staff could accelerate the use of digital forms and have all of the data up to date. This
absolutely.
from a success point of view, is I'll say I was going to say immeasurable, but in this case it's actually measurable, which is nice. So they could actually tell how much time and how much effort. And when you equate that then to people's daily jobs and their salaries and all that sort of thing, this all helps towards an effective project completion. Now, again, we have no negative feedback from organizations who digitize their processes. We don't have any negative feedback, as in when they get it up and running. The only pushback we ever get at the start is the fact that trying to get people to adopt, and that would always be the straightforward scenario of getting them to be involved at the start, getting users, you get a process that is obvious to them all, and the fact that this is the future, that adoption of this way of operating is only going to help the organization, and as a result will help the individuals within the organization. The great thing is that as you move through this evolution of digitizing, you see results, and the results keep increasing. So information becomes instant as a result of that. And the cool thing is, we always find this is great, that when people look at it isolating on say an issue or isolating on a project, but all of the data that's gathered for particular projects and particular endeavors means that the next time they do similar projects, they've got solid data to work off to make decisions upon. And all of this is on a platform that the organization can manage themselves. And they don't have to sap the IT infrastructure or the resources within IT. Big thing is to get senior support though. I mean, we've seen the best, Paul, you come across this all the time. Senior support is paramount in this. And when you get that, it makes everything so much easier. Now, again, I mean, I think we are really pressed for time here because there's some questions coming in, and I'll be asking Anna to furnish us with some of those. But the reality of this is that this shouldn't be considered as a big task. You can actually take a trial on our platform, other platforms, whatever you wish, but you can take a trial on any of these things. Give it a go. Pick a process, get a proof of concept put together, show people what it might look like. Start. Just get it going. Sorry, Anna, I'm going to pass over to you. I know we've stepped over our time a small bit, but I'm sure you'll understand.
Thank you, Shane, Paul. That was very insightful. Yes, we have some time for questions now. So what are your top 3 tips for user adoption? Who wants to take it?
Oh, wow. Paul, I'll let you take that.
Oh, okay, sure. So I think the key thing for user adoption is to get the draft out early. So if you're going to start to digitize a process, draft it out and pass it out to your workforce and get their feedback and then respond to that quickly. We've got lots of evidence of projects where people have had a difficult time. For example, there was one large construction project where they had 900 managers who needed to use a digitized process that was never digitized before. It was brand new. They had previously just worked on paper. And the challenge there was to get them to use the very first digital process. How did they do that? They drafted out a process, got it into the hands of the workforce, and waited for the feedback. There was tons of feedback, but what they were able to do was respond and make changes to the system very, very quickly and have them try again. And we're talking about like the following week, try it again, guys. And that really, really helped a workforce that had very low digital skills adopt the process. So what I'd say is, number 1, draft your process. Number 2 is accept the feedback and act on it quickly, right? So draft it, get it out quickly, accept the feedback and act on it quickly. And the third one would be to do with providing people with adequate training. Now, with a system, different systems have different training requirements. With our system, we feel it's a very low training requirement, but certainly it's providing some guidance to those end users on how to work with the system. And that guidance can be a form of training program, that's okay. Or you can actually build guidance into the system itself, which would be our preferred approach, where the system itself tells you what to do next. And that's very much the way we propose. So that would be my 3 tips on adoption.
Right, many thanks, Paul. Another question, we have existing systems in place already. Does the FlowForma tool have integration capabilities?
Paul, I'll leave that with you again, seeing as you're the more technical person.
I'll take that one. So, yeah, absolutely. So the key thing is that digitizing a process with FlowForma straight away versus the manual process straight away gives you a big benefit. So you actually don't need to integrate to already get significant return on your investment, okay? But if you want to integrate, yeah, we've got lots of ways to integrate. For example, we have a no-code web API interface, so that any solution out there that supports a web API, no matter what it is, you're able to integrate in real time with FlowForma. And we also can integrate via tools like Microsoft Logic Apps, so that's an integration layer. We can also integrate using, for example, a database in the background as well. So there's lots of different ways to integrate, and all of these methods happen in real time. So as the people are completing their steps in the process, you can interact and pull information out of those, pull and push information out of those back-end systems. So it's typically no problem at all, and we do it with lots of our customers.
Right, many thanks, Paul. We have another question. Do you have any tips which can help us to prioritize which processes to automate?
I'll grab that one, Paul. I'll give you a rest. Help prioritize. So straight away, you're going to need to pick the obvious ones, the ones that are going to have an impact on the organization. But to be honest, after that, the organizations that digitize the best are those that take feedback from the different departments from a priority point of view of what they feel needs to be done. And we've had, it's funny, I'm thinking of the example of a hospital that uses FlowForma. They actually set up a small team that would meet with the department heads and would find out on a monthly basis what they felt, what needed to be digitized and what they felt, and why would it have an impact on the organization. And that set up their roadmap for the processes to be digitized. And then like the following month, when they had the next meeting, they could say, these are the ones that are going live, these are the ones that we're in progress with, et cetera, and then get feedback. So it was an ongoing thing. Once they had the mechanism in place that digitization was going to be an ongoing and fairly fast-moving productivity mechanism. Once they had the knowledge of that, everyone felt comfortable about self-prioritizing by department. So you get that clamor at the very start when people say, oh, we're going to digitize processes, and you get everybody rushing to the door. But when they see that it's actually going to happen at a good pace, they'll self-prioritize because they're involved. And when they're involved, their feedback is listened to, as Paul was saying, and the processes are adopted, then everybody buys in a lot better. So that's the way they would be. How to prioritize? You ask around. You get the obvious ones, but you also ask department heads what their priorities are.
Right. Many thanks, Shane, Paul. I think we've run out of time. Would you like to say something to our viewers before we finish this webinar?
Yeah, just one thing, very simple. This is a really straightforward scenario to try out. You just sign up for a 14-day trial. There's no cost. We get people involved with you. We'll go through a process with you, for example, set it up so you can evangelize, etc. But it is really straightforward. and there's no commitment from anybody. Try it out. Basically, this is the future, so you might as well try it out now. Thanks, Anne.
Right. Great, thank you so much. And may I remind our viewers that in 15 minutes time, there will be a final session for today, and I hope to see you soon.